this is an interesting time for rethink. This is an interesting time for rethink in US-China Dialogue at both the official track and the think tank track. So I run a China program at a think tank. We have in past done a lot of track 2 dialogues with China, bring delegations to China to really understand what's happening there, exchange views with Chinese colleagues. Unfortunately, China is now blocking and limiting our market access in the same way that they're doing to US companies. On January 1st, China passed a new NGO law that says that American think tanks cannot conduct so-called temporary activities in China without A, getting a Chinese partner, B, giving the partner our money, and C, reporting to the police before to get approval for everything we plan to do, and D, reporting to the police after on exactly what we did. So we're seeing the same kind of market access type restrictions that the American business sector is seeing, even starting to impact the dialogue tracks between think tanks in the US and China. And this is a very, very bad time to have that open communication be restricted. At the official track, the problem, as I see it, is that we have large in small impact dialogues between the US and China. The SNED, there are hundreds of US government employees going over. There are hundreds of outcomes. In some specific tracks, there's a lot of great stuff happening. Climate is great. Ocean is great. Econ, I question whether we're getting our bang for the buck in the econ track of the SNED. Personally, I'm concerned that we are measuring our success in terms of process and number of meetings instead of the actual outcomes that we're getting from China. I would much rather see a very small number, maybe 3 or 5 high-level US officials go to China and sit down with the 3 or 5 Chinese counterparts that can actually impact decision-making in Beijing, and whether or not you get a change in policy is the metric for success in US-China economic and trade negotiation. I'd much rather see small in, big impact in those exchanges, and I'm hoping that we'll see a shift in that direction.
2 points. One, Dorothy, I think we need to all read the economic literature again on what trade deficits and current account surplus and so forth mean in terms of economic growth, and we might want to look at our own history there. It is a much deeper conversation than we can have right now. On the different dialogues and so forth, I think Melanie makes some very, very good points. I thought the SNED that was set up by the leadership of Hank Paulson in 2006, I think, I thought was a pretty good effort, and it changed a bit in the Obama administration. I think that Melanie makes a very good point about being a more focused dialogue at a little bit higher level. I think that is something I can see happening. It does suggest that you have to have a real engagement strategy with China from at the official sector level, and not just basically use a bunch of punishment tools, but you need in a way to also have an engagement strategy. And I have some hope that that's exactly where the Trump administration is starting to go, but it's a little hard to tell at this point.
Thank you. Rob, do you have a thought on this, or shall we open up the floor?
Let's open up to it.
Okay. So you all have been very patient. Thanks very much for an interesting discussion. If there are questions, we can take a few. So I think Carl has a question. You can introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Carl Schonander from the Software and Information Industry Association. I have a question for Melanie. You said where there are no rules, we should create something like that, and you mentioned specifically the technology or cross-border data flows, things like that. Of course, we had such rules in TPP. In the absence of TPP, what would you recommend for getting to those rules? Thank you.
Sure. So, echoing John Pomfret in the panel before, I really understand the concern that labor groups and environment groups are raising about the impact on the TPP in the U.S. And my personal opinion, I think the Obama administration could have done a much better job at explaining the strategy and addressing those concerns. But as a China person who's looking at strategy with China, that was the kind of strategy that would be perfect for giving China a positive roadmap to move towards on issues like this. Enforcement is important, but you don't want to just be banging them over the head all the time. You also want to be encouraging China to move towards adopting rules and standards where our companies and Chinese companies can be working together in ways that work well for both sides. TPP would, in that sense, TPP would have been a good model in creating a safe playing field for American companies and Asian friends and allies that China was very interested in figuring out how to get into, and that would have required them to adopt some of the same rules and standards. In the absence of that, the Trump administration seems to be most interested in let 100 bilateral trade negotiations bloom. That's a tricky process. Those negotiations take a long time. On the tech issues in particular, I think one of the strongest levers in our arsenal is the fact that this isn't a U.S. problem. This is a global problem. There are companies from countries around the world facing the same issues. We always have more leverage with China when we address these issues in a multilateral way. It's not just the U.S. trying to keep China down. It's globally in these industries, these policies are seen as a concern. So in an ideal situation, we could come up with something that would look like TPP from an outward-facing perspective, but address some of the concerns that have been raised domestically about how TPP would impact American workers and American standards. In the absence of that, it might be wise to start thinking about, is there something we can do in particular tech sectors? Are there some tech-specific agreements that we could approach with friends and allies first, and then maybe bring China on board? I'm not the person to say exactly what that should look like, but that seems to me to be the kind of solutions we want to be thinking about, because it's important that we pair enforcement efforts with positive roadmaps for China to follow, for the reformers to grip onto and try to drag the rest of the economy with them. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that concern us, fixing them is actually in China's national interest as well. And the more we can do to give them a roadmap in that process, just as the U.S. did with the WTO, the better.
Thanks. So, other questions? It's a very shy group. I know otherwise, since I know many of you. Please.
I'm Daniel, and I'm actually from Dorothy.
Could you wait just he's bringing a microphone so we can hear, everybody can hear you.
I normally have a pretty loud voice, so this is for Rob.
And you are, I'm sorry?
I'm Daniel Singer from Peking University, and I actually do work in the ag sector. So just was thinking about your point about leveraging CFIUS could lead to rent seeking by U.S. corporations. And many times I see that there's a very strong linkage between China's outbound investment policy and their trade policy. Just like, for example, the Smithfield deal. It seemed pretty apparent that the approval of the Smithfield deal was part of the U.S. port getting better access to China. Now, it was the mechanism may be like, the domestic national champion lobbying their own government. And so it sounds like what you're saying is kind of maybe we should kind of divorce trade policy and investment policy, because maybe there's a rent-seeking issue. I'd like you to elaborate on that. But my question is, well, should CFIUS just be about national security, or should our investment policy be tied to a greater industrial policy about our competitiveness, and say, okay, well, we'll approve the Smithfield deal, but don't turn down our port containers when they have 0.01% ractopamine, or do things that allow us to invest in your port sector, in your economy, so that we can get more of that market share. So in any of these sectors, whether it's Syngenta or some other deal, where we'll let you kind of buy something, but it's not just about security, it's about let us simultaneously get market share, so leveraging one to get more than the other. Is that not a wise thing for us to do, or are there conflicts of interest? Thanks.
I'm not a particular fan of negotiating the way we have negotiated the trade and investment deals. I think that they have largely failed to help the U.S. as a country. It may have been good for some U.S. companies, but many of them have resulted in growing trade deficits and lost jobs and downward pressure on wages. And this broader process of competition with imports from low-wage countries, because we've emphasized so much negotiating deals with low-wage countries, and that's in part what the TPP was about, bringing in Vietnam and Malaysia and so on. And every time we do that, expand trade with those countries, and it drives down wages in the U.S., as well as contributing, at least based on past experience, to growing trade deficits. So I think we need a strategic timeout, negotiating trade and investment deals until we can develop much more effective strategies for rebuilding U.S. manufacturing and rebalancing U.S. trade. I'm happy to have a debate about whether balanced trade should be a national objective or not. We can talk about that, but clearly the imbalance of trade is not only bad for the U.S. as a country, it's also destabilizing at this point our political system because of the pressure I think that is being felt from workers who are suffering from lost jobs and downward pressure on their wages. So I think this issue is ripe for rethinking.
Oh, by the way, sorry, the quote was actually you saying it.
Yeah, it was me.
Sorry, what's your message?
No, exactly. You asked Rob. So I thought he did a good job. On CFIUS. So the idea of basically putting in an economic benefits test is something that has been looked at for about 30 years. I am not in favor of it. I'm not a believer in it. I think that it is primarily because I'm such a believer that I have a different view than Rob, obviously, that I believe that foreign investment is actually helpful to our economy. So if you look at Japan, the reason we have CFIUS in the late 80s was there was a lot of concerns about Japanese investment. The Japanese right now employ roughly about 800,000 people in the United States, something like that. That's pretty significant. I would say that's been good for the United States. I actually like the fact that we have Japanese firms and Canadian firms and French firms and German firms and UK firms and Chinese firms that invest in this country and actually help create jobs, create better paying jobs, and so forth. Now, if you want to have a model in which we're going to try to leverage specific transactions, that's what CFIUS looks at, not the whole sector or anything, specific transactions, and you're going to use that as leverage in order to get some gain that we want to use in China. I think that's possible. I can see it being done carefully, very carefully. And maybe you're right on the Smithfield transaction. I actually think you're wrong, but maybe you're right. And so I think that if you do it as a broad policy measure, I think you do start getting into economic runs. How do I, as a competitor in the United States, utilize the CFIUS to my advantage against a different competitor who happens to be foreign? Now, the place where maybe it makes a little more sense is because China, there's so many state-owned enterprises that do this type of investment as opposed to privately held enterprises. Could you do something more on the state-owned side? And I think the answer is that is something we could explore. But that would be much more particular. Anyway, so that's kind of my view on it. I promise you, Congress is going to be debating this soon, and we'll see what happens. In the past, whether it was Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, or Barack Obama, all those executives would have said, I don't like this idea. I don't know where Donald Trump is. I'm not sure he's in the same spot as those other presidents have been.
So thank you very much. I mean, I think we have some homework for yet some more panels. I think that there's a distinction that's come through loud and clear in terms of CFIUS as a national security review and an investment review and what some of the objectives might be. So I think all the board members have taken good note of all of the comments, and we may be back to you for round two. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to the panel. Thanks for taking up the rest of our policy issues for the coming months. I'm very grateful. And maybe calling you back. We're not taking a formal break, everybody. We're just going to bring up the second panel. It's going to take about 60 seconds, so please be quick. Also, a couple people bought books. We sold out all the books, which I'm glad. John Prompter's glad, but the payments didn't take. So folks who bought books, can they check in with Diego in the back of the room and make sure that their payment was actually processed properly?